Welcome to the Still Stoic. I'm genuinely glad you're here, because what we're about to explore could very well shift how you see yourself and how others see you. Let me ask you something. What truly sets intelligent men apart? Is it knowing every fact in the book? Being able to recite historical dates or solve equations on the spot? Not quite. Their secret lies in something much quieter and far more powerful. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing when not to speak. Sometimes what you don't say reveals more about your character than 1,000 clever words ever could. You see, I've spent years watching people through the lens of ancient Stoic philosophy, and yes, through far too many coffees in busy cafes, quietly observing human nature play out in real time. And if there's one thing I've consistently noticed among the wisest men I've met, it's this. They don't waste their words. They don't scramble to fill every silence, and they never say things that chip away at their integrity. So in today's reflection, we're diving into 7 things intelligent men never say. Not because they're perfect, but because they've learned, often the hard way, that these phrases lead nowhere good. Stick around, hit that subscribe button, and let's walk the Stoic path together. 1. I already know that. It's a phrase that slips out almost reflexively. I already know that. It sounds confident, even assertive, but beneath the surface, it reveals something else entirely. A closed mind. A truly intelligent man knows better. He understands that the moment we tell ourselves there's nothing left to learn, we slam the door shut on growth. Let me share a personal moment that humbled me deeply. Years ago, I was working with a mentor, one of those rare individuals who radiated quiet confidence, the kind forged through years of hard-earned experience. We were reviewing a process I'd done dozens, maybe hundreds of times before. As he began explaining a small detail, I interrupted without thinking. "Yeah, I know that already." He paused, looked at me, not with anger, but with a calm weight that said more than words ever could. Then he moved on. That night, it hit me. I hadn't just cut him off. I had robbed myself of the opportunity to see something new through his eyes. He had lived through things I hadn't. Things that no manual, no online training, no YouTube tutorial could have taught me. And yet, in my rush to appear competent, I shut out his wisdom. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You cannot learn something you think you already know." That wasn't just a reminder, it was a warning. The ego has a way of dressing arrogance in the costume of competence. It tells us we're solid, while we're actually balancing on a very fragile pride. But intelligent men, Stoic men, understand that knowledge isn't some trophy you win and lock behind glass. It's a flowing river. You step into it once, and the next time you return, the current has changed. The water is never the same. I once saw a veteran carpenter listening intently to a young apprentice who was explaining a basic wood joint technique. He nodded, asked questions, even thanked him for sharing. Later, I asked the old man why he didn't just say, "I know that already." He smiled and said, "Because sometimes you learn more by hearing how someone else sees it." That's real wisdom, and that's the kind of intelligence that doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need applause. It listens because it respects life's ever-changing perspective. So next time you're tempted to think, "I've heard this before," pause, listen anyway. Not because you need to entertain someone, but because you just might catch a new angle, a nuance you hadn't seen before. And even if you don't, you're still practicing humility, you're showing respect, and in the long run, that's what makes you someone truly worth listening to. In Stoic philosophy, we call this self-mastery, the discipline to tame your ego, the strength to remain a lifelong student. Because in the end, that kind of quiet intelligence, it outlasts the loudest voice in the room. 2. That's impossible. Years ago, I had the chance to work with a man named Robert. He was sharp, experienced, and carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had weathered many storms. He had that rare ability to manage pressure without ever showing it. like someone holding up the weight of a company on his shoulders while making it look effortless. But there was one thing he said over and over again that caught my attention. It became almost like a mantra, a reflex. Anytime a new idea was brought to the table, whether it was a suggestion to enter a new market, modernize a slow system, or approach a tough client, he would respond with just two words: "That's impossible." At first it sounded reasonable, cautious, even responsible. After all, who wants to waste time chasing unrealistic goals? But as time passed, something else became clear, painfully clear. Every time Robert said, "That's impossible," he wasn't really talking about the project. He was talking about himself. Those words didn't reflect the reality of the challenge. They reflected the boundaries of his own fear, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being wrong, and maybe most of all, the fear of trying and not succeeding. And here's the thing. This kind of fear doesn't scream. It doesn't make a scene. It wears a mask of logic, caution, and practicality. But underneath that mask is something Stoic philosophers knew all too well: self-imposed limits. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that was exactly what I saw in Robert. He wasn't assessing things as they were. He was projecting his internal fear onto the situation. I've come to recognize that fear. It's quiet. It hides in phrases like, "It's not realistic," or "It's too risky." But make no mistake, at its core, it's a decision to shrink instead of stretch. The Stoics challenge this mindset. They remind us the obstacle is not the problem. It's how we see the obstacle that defeats us. I saw the truth of this a few years later on a project that, by all logic, should have failed. The budget was barely enough. The deadline was tighter than it had any right to be. And the team, green, untested. Every part of me wanted to say, "This is impossible." But instead I paused and asked, what can I control today? Not the whole mountain, just the next step. That shift in mindset changed everything. We didn't do miracles. We didn't pull off the impossible. We just kept showing up, step by step, problem by problem. And it became one of the most successful projects I've ever been part of. Not because it was easy, but because we refused to be paralyzed by the size of the challenge. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And he was right. Because when a man says, "That's impossible," he's waving a white flag before the battle has even begun. But the intelligent man, he knows that impossible often just means unfamiliar. It's not a wall, it's a question. Are you willing to take one step forward? Stoic courage isn't about blind optimism. It's not about pretending things are easy. It's about disciplined persistence, showing up again and again, even when the odds aren't in your favor. Because life will ask difficult things of us. And the moment we label them impossible, we lock ourselves out of progress. But the man who learns to take the next step, no matter how uncertain, how small, he opens doors others never even notice. And that's not just intelligence. That's wisdom, refined, tested, and earned. 3, that's not my fault. It sounds simple, harmless even. But make no mistake, "That's not my fault" is one of the most quietly damaging phrases a man can say. In the moment, it often feels justified. When things fall apart, at work, in a relationship, in life, it's instinctive to defend ourselves, to point elsewhere, to make it clear, this mess, not on me. But here's the hard truth. Every time we push responsibility away, we give away something far more precious, our power. Truly intelligent men understand this. They've learned often through painful experience that responsibility isn't the same as blame. It's about influence. And the moment you refuse to take any ownership, even a sliver, you give up your chance to shape what happens next. I witnessed this play out years ago with a friend of mine, Michael. He had just lost a major client. Naturally, he was frustrated, and he wasted no time explaining what went wrong. The client was unreasonable. The market was shifting. My team didn't deliver on time. And to be fair, he wasn't lying. Each of those things had played a role. But while he was busy proving why the failure wasn't his fault, something else slipped quietly out of his grasp. The opportunity to grow from it. Because here's what he couldn't see. By refusing to own even a fraction of the responsibility, he handed over the one thing that could have changed his outcome: control over himself. The Stoics were crystal clear on this. They taught that we must focus on what's within our control and release the rest. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When we say, "That's not my fault," we shift the power to change onto someone else's shoulders. We wait for them to fix it, them to apologize, and them to do better. But when we accept even a small share of the responsibility, something changes. We reclaim our influence. We move from being passive victims to active participants. From powerless to powerful. I've seen this in my own life more times than I'd like to admit. When I chose to own my part, no matter how minor, it opened doors I hadn't noticed before. Maybe I didn't communicate clearly. Maybe I could have prepared more thoroughly. Even when others made bigger mistakes, my willingness to own my role shifted something inside me. It built trust, not just with the people around me, but with myself, because it showed I wasn't waiting to be rescued or vindicated. I was ready to act. Blame is easy. Responsibility, that's hard. But Stoic wisdom reminds us, strength lives in the hard things. We're not here to avoid adversity. We're here to rise above it. And rising begins the moment you ask, what could I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead. Not by pointing fingers, but by carving a path forward, even through the wreckage. If this message speaks to you, let me know by commenting yes below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, your journey, because your voice matters. Let's grow together. 4. I don't need any help. One of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself is this: I don't need any help. At first it sounds noble, independent, stoic, strong. It's the kind of thing our culture often celebrates. The image of the lone wolf, the self-made man who walks through fire alone, never complains, never leans on anyone. But peel back the surface and the truth underneath is far less heroic. The refusal to ask for help isn't usually a reflection of strength. It's a reflection of pride, quiet, corrosive, and deceptively convincing. It isolates us. It convinces us that struggling in silence is a virtue. And over time, it chips away at the very resilience we think we're protecting. I was reminded of this while reading about Abraham Lincoln during the darkest and most desperate days of the American Civil War. History often paints him as a solitary figure, somber, burdened, carrying the weight of a fractured nation on his weary shoulders. But what's often forgotten is how deeply Lincoln leaned on others. He didn't rule in isolation. He built a cabinet made up of rivals, men who disagreed with him, challenged him, and saw the world differently. Not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood this timeless truth. Wisdom is not born from isolation. It's forged in humility, the kind that says, I don't know it all. Take, for example, the brutal conflict at Antietam. Despite his differences with General McClellan, Lincoln visited him in person, seeking insight, listening carefully, even when they clashed. He didn't surround himself with yes men. He spent countless hours in discussion, debate, and even contradiction, because he valued perspective over pride. And that, far from being weakness, was one of Lincoln's greatest strengths. It's a lesson intelligent men eventually come to learn. Self-reliance is important, but it was never meant to be absolute. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man of his time, didn't pretend to have all the answers. In his meditations, he openly acknowledged the mentors, friends, and teachers who shaped his thinking. He listed them by name. He gave credit where it was due. If the Emperor of Rome could do that, why do we, so much smaller, so much more fragile, think we have to carry everything alone? Still, many of us do. We tell ourselves that asking for help means admitting defeat, that needing someone else is a sign of weakness. But that belief, it's a trap. It locks us in our own minds, drowning quietly in problems we were never meant to shoulder alone. And maybe worst of all, it denies those around us the gift of giving. Because when we refuse to ask for help, we rob others of their chance to support us. We block the flow of mutual aid, the very connection that holds communities, friendships, and families together. I've fallen into that trap myself. There was a time when I thought I had to carry everything. Work, family, responsibilities, expectations, like some badge of honor. I thought that keeping it together meant keeping it to myself. All it did was wear me down, quietly, slowly. The turning point came when I finally said out loud to someone I trusted, "I can't do this alone." And what I received in return wasn't pity or judgment. It was understanding. It was support. And from that one act of humility came a renewed clarity and strength I hadn't felt in years. That's when I realized real strength isn't measured by how long you can walk alone. It's measured by knowing when to reach out your hand and when to take one. The Stoics teach that we are not isolated fragments. We are part of a larger whole. We were made for cooperation, for mutual support. As Epictetus reminds us, no man is an island. When we act like we are, we fight against the very design of life. And here's the paradox. Asking for help doesn't diminish your strength. It defines it. Because asking for help takes courage. It takes honesty. And those are the hallmarks of a truly wise and intelligent man. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "I've got this, I don't need anyone," pause, breathe. Ask yourself, is that strength speaking or pride in disguise? And remember Lincoln, who led not with ego, but with humility. He understood that even the strongest leaders need others to stand tall. 5. I'm too old for that. One of the most quietly damaging lies a man can tell himself is this: I'm too old for that. It rarely comes out in anger. It often slips in softly, disguised as practicality or cloaked in self-deprecating humor. But behind it is something much heavier. A quiet resignation, a subtle surrender to the idea that the best parts of life have already passed, and that what remains isn't worth chasing. That one sentence has the power to shut doors that were still wide open. It whispers to us that our time is over, even while the clock is still ticking. But intelligent men, truly reflective men, see through that illusion. They know that saying, "I'm too old for that," isn't just limiting. It's toxic. It chips away at purpose. It dulls curiosity. It slowly convinces us to stop living before life is done with us. I once read about a man named Harry Bernstein. At 93 years old, after an entire life spent working as a magazine editor and raising a family, he decided to do something new. He sat down to write his first book. It was a memoir, The Invisible Wall, a deeply personal story about his childhood in a poor English mill town, divided by prejudice and religion. Publishers turned him down, one after another, but Harry kept going. Finally, at 96, the book was published, and it took off. It was translated into multiple languages and touched readers around the world. He went on to write 3 more books after that. Harry didn't believe the lie. He didn't tell himself, "It's too late." He had something to say, something to create, and he did it. What moved me most about Harry's story wasn't the success, it was the courage. The quiet, powerful belief that his story wasn't over. That even in his 90s, there was still growth ahead. Still something meaningful to contribute. And here's the truth. That courage isn't reserved for people like Harry. It's available to all of us. Every day we're offered the choice. Do we give in to that quiet voice saying we've missed our chance? Or do we embrace the possibility that as long as we're breathing, we have purpose? The Stoics were clear age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, death is inevitable, yes, But until it comes, our duty is to live as fully, as wisely, and as virtuously as we can. He believed that true wisdom often comes with age, not just because time has passed, but because a curious and courageous spirit deepens over time. Growth doesn't end as we get older. It ripens, it sharpens, it reveals things we couldn't have seen in our youth. I've seen men in their 60s pick up entirely new trades, start businesses, mentor a new generation of leaders. And I've seen others, just as capable, withdraw, convinced by their own doubts that their time had passed. What separates them isn't health, or money, or opportunity, it's mindset. The man who says, "I'm too old for that," has already shut the door. But the one who asks, "What can I do now?" he throws it open again. Age doesn't disqualify us from boldness. It amplifies our value. It gives us tools younger men haven't earned yet: perspective, clarity, resilience. These are not signs that we're finished. They're proof that we're finally ready. And that's the Stoic way: to keep learning, to keep striving, to keep moving forward right up to the very last breath. Because as long as we're here, there's still work to be done. There's still growth to be had. There's still life to live. If this message spoke to something inside you, give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe, because every time I uncover a new perspective on how to live wisely and fully, I want you to be the first to hear it. 6. I'll do it later. Few phrases are as deceptively comforting and as quietly destructive as this one. I'll do it later. It sounds harmless, even rational. A soft promise we make to ourselves that we will act, just not right now. But underneath that calm tone lies a truth we often ignore. Later is the graveyard where our best intentions go to die. Intelligent men know this, and many, myself included, have learned it the hard way. Delaying what matters doesn't buy you time. It steals it from you. Every time we say, "I'll call them tomorrow. I'll apologize next week. I'll start that project when things slow down," we're making a dangerous wager with something we have zero control over: time. I once knew a man named Thomas. By every outward measure, he was successful. A thriving business, a close-knit family, the respect of everyone who knew him. But he was always busy. Too busy. He loved his aging father deeply, but he told himself he'd spend more time with him later. Once the office quieted down, once the next deal closed, once life got back to normal, the fishing trip they talked about, postponed. The phone calls, delayed. The simple moments, sitting together, just talking, pushed aside again and again. And then one day, without warning, later ran out. His father passed away, suddenly, no warning, no second chance. Thomas was left with a phone full of unsent drafts and a heart full of words he never spoke. He shared this with me years later, not for sympathy, but as a warning. We always think we have more time, until we don't. The Stoics were brutally honest about this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily of his mortality. Not to be grim or morbid, but to sharpen his urgency. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This isn't just a philosophical idea. It's a practice, a mindset, a discipline. Because wise men know the truth. The clock is not in our hands. Time won't wait for you to feel ready. It doesn't pause for your fears, your doubts, your excuses. And what we delay today, we may never have another shot at tomorrow. That's why intelligent men act now. They make the phone call they've been avoiding. They take the first awkward step toward repairing a broken relationship. They begin the project that's been collecting dust in the back of their mind, buried beneath fear and hesitation. Not because it's easy, but because they've seen the cost of waiting. I've felt it too. I've postponed conversations because I didn't want to feel uncomfortable. I avoided writing letters because I assumed there'd be time. But when I stopped waiting, when I acted despite the discomfort, something changed. The weight lifted, clarity replaced regret. And I realized It's not our intentions that shape our lives, it's our actions. The Stoics teach us to live now, fully, consciously, with urgency. Later is a comfortable illusion, one that soothes us until it's too late to act. The man who acts today, who refuses to leave the important things undone, lives without regret. And that is true wisdom, because opportunity rarely knocks twice. It doesn't slam the door, it fades quietly. While we're waiting for a perfect moment that never comes. 7. That's just how I am. Few beliefs limit a man more than this quiet declaration. That's just how I am. It sounds final, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. Unchangeable, immovable. But in truth, it's not clarity. It's resignation. It's a subtle way of saying, I've stopped trying. I've given up on becoming better. Intelligent men don't entertain this mindset for long because they understand something that many overlook. We are not fixed beings. We are not chained to our past, our habits, or our old selves. Who we are is shaped by what we choose to do, day after day, moment after moment. The instant a man says he can't change, he isn't stating a fact. He's avoiding responsibility, and I've seen this time and time again. A man loses his temper again, and when someone calls it out, he shrugs and says, "That's just how I am." Another man avoids opening up in relationships. Vulnerability terrifies him. So he tells himself, I've just always been this way. But these aren't truths. They're excuses. They let fear wear the mask of self-awareness. They turn inertia into identity. And deep down, these phrases reveal something more dangerous. Resistance. Resistance to discomfort. Resistance to doing the hard, necessary work of change. Resistance to the truth that no man is ever finished becoming who he's meant to be. The Stoics didn't shy away from this. They confronted it directly. They taught that we are not prisoners of our emotions or our history. We are not doomed to be reactive, stubborn, or stagnant. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." In the same way, it's not your personality or past that holds you back. It's the story you keep telling yourself about who you are. Change is uncomfortable. It forces us to look inward, to examine what's real and what's simply familiar. And sometimes that familiarity has been quietly poisoning us. But the Stoics believe something powerful, that self-mastery, not external control, is the highest goal of a meaningful life, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Growth demands honesty. It asks us to look in the mirror and ask the hard question, am I acting this way because it's truly who I am, or because it's easier than doing the work to change? Wise men choose the harder path, not because they hate who they are, but because they respect themselves enough not to stay the same. Wisdom, after all, is not a trophy. It's a practice. It's the daily decision to become a slightly better version of yourself, even when no one else is watching. In the end, that's just how I am is a phrase that quietly closes the door on possibility. But the Stoics remind us, life is change. Nature is change. To resist that is to resist life itself. The man who understands this doesn't fear change. He welcomes it. He sees himself not as finished, but in progress. Unpolished, imperfect, yes, but willing. And in that willingness lies true wisdom. If you've caught yourself saying one of these 7 phrases, trust me, you're not alone. I've said them too, more times than I care to admit. But here's the good news. Intelligent men aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who notice them and choose to do better. That's what we're doing here, together. Becoming better, one honest thought, one mindful choice at a time. So let me ask you, which one hit home for you today? Maybe it's time to leave "that's just how I am" behind. Maybe it's time to let go of "I'll do it later" before later turns into never. Whatever it is, this is your invitation. Take the next step. Because wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and always moving forward. If today's message sparked something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with a friend who's walking the same path. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video.